Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of our program. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle, and today we're privileged to have with us Jessica Rhodes, who is the founder and CEO of Interview Connections. Welcome to the program, Jessica.
Thanks, Mike. I'm excited to be here.
Hey, so let's just jump right into, obviously, the name of your company, Interview Connections. That is a connector of people who want to be interviewed or need to get interviews. And just give us a little bit of your background for people that don't know your vast and storied past, but catch us up to speed on what brought you to this point of Interview Connections.
Yeah, well, my journey of being an interview connector all kind of started when I launched my first business in 2013, late 2012, early 2013. I started my virtual assistant business, and I was working with clients one-on-one. I had just had my first child, so it was ideally a business that was from home, or it was a business that was from home, and that was the ideal part about it. And I was doing a variety of tasks for small business owners and entrepreneurs. I was actually doing Pinterest marketing and infographic design, client support, sales, and podcast interview booking. I was getting my clients booked for interviews, and I reached a point in my business 3 or 4 months in where I really wanted to increase my income, scale, and, for stay-at-home moms, starting a business, there's only so many hours in the day, which means when you work those max hours, there's not many other options to make more money. It's either increase your hourly rate or, get childcare and just work more hours. And, my son was 3 months old. I wasn't ready to have a nanny or, put him in daycare. So I talked to my dad, who happens to be a business coach. He was actually one of my first clients. And, we talked about what all the services that I was providing for my clients, and he was asking me some really key questions like, what is the most profitable service you have? What is what's in most demand? What do your clients want and need the most of all the things that you're doing for them? And then what do you enjoy the most? And for me, I looked at all the services I was providing, and getting booked as a podcast guest, finding guests for my clients' podcasts was easily the thing that I enjoyed the most. It was the thing that was in highest demand with the clients I was working with, and it could potentially scale and be more profitable than any of the other services. So that was the starting point for me in my business, kind of honing in and focusing on one service, niching down. I started very, very general. My business is called Entrepreneur Support Services. I mean, you can't get more general than that as a virtual assistant. And then, as I wanted to scale and be more profitable, I niched down and created interviewconnections.com and book podcast guests and get people booked for interviews on podcasts, and have grown out a team. So I have a team of virtual assistants and people that, book the interviews and work with the clients, and it's just grown and grown, and that's how I got here today.
Yeah, I love that realization, and sometimes we get caught in the midst of do and go and let's get her done, and someone asks for this and you're like, I can do that and let's do it. And I think that that's natural, but then to grow or to scale sanely, without losing your own mind, what your dad, your business coach, gave you was such huge advice of, well, what do you like to do? And what is a pretty good, margin? Like, if you like to do something that gave you 1 penny in margin, come on, you got to couple that with what do you like to do, and what's a pretty decent profit margin for you? And I literally last week read the book Built to Sell, and then when I finished that, started reading The One Thing by Gary Keller, and both of those are talking about exactly what you just said, which is you have to pick that one thing. And now, does it have to be only, because I'm sure in podcast getting people interviews and getting all that scheduled up, there's probably some little bullet points under there that's not only one thing, but it's one mindset.
Oh, absolutely. And I read Built to Sell. I listened to the audiobook of Built to Sell several months ago, and that was a book that definitely really changed my mindset, and not changed it, but helped me really focus on creating the systems and, such great lessons that I can see the one thing over there on my bookshelf in the to-read pile, but I really believe in niching down. And then even as Interview Connections has grown, there have been services that I've kind of stripped away because it wasn't, there were, like, for example, I, for a long time, kept doing graphics for clients. Like, for each of their interviews and each of their shows, I would do a custom graphic. And after a while, I realized it wasn't a very profitable service. A lot of clients didn't even need the graphics, but I included them anyway. So I was creating something that, was expense on my end, but they didn't even need. So I remember at the end of 2015, I kind of looked at all of the things that I was doing for my clients, and I kind of kept the services that, everyone actually needed and wanted. And then the things that weren't really profitable and weren't really being used as much, I said, you know what, we're no longer doing graphics. I've cut out show notes because it seemed like, oh, this is more revenue, but when there's such high labor costs and expenses associated with it, and clients don't even really need it, it was not worth it. So I've really niched down. Mm-hmm.
And that's going to look different for every single different business. And maybe there's 1 in 100 businesses that ever arrive and get to the point where we are niched down and solid, as tight as can be. But I think it's always that whole constant reevaluation. So I just love that concept, that mindset. So that was awesome. I wanted to comment on that. Hey, so first question that I've got is, for an entrepreneur looking to establish authority and influence, what's more important, being interviewed or interviewing others?
Well, my answer is, of course, I want to say both, but the question I often get is, what's first? And here's the thing. It's really powerful to be interviewed as a guest expert on other shows. 100% that is an amazing way to establish yourself as authority, get known as the expert in your field. However, it's also important to be interviewing others, and not just interviewing others, but creating content on your own platform, having your own podcast, doing your own videos, and writing a blog, for your own website. Because think of it this way, you could go out and be interviewed on tons of shows, but when all of those listeners come back to your site and they see no content, they see no blogs to read, no videos to watch, no podcasts to listen to that you've produced, then there's not that foundation, the credibility that goes along with being interviewed as a guest expert. So, getting interviewed as a guest expert, 100% an amazing way to establish yourself as an authority, but you've got to have the backing of content on your own platform as well.
So it's kind of like 100% getting interviewed and then 100% interviewing others. So
it's 200%. Yeah, exactly. You're only going to get so far as a guest. Mm-hmm.
And, I would almost say, okay, if you had to pick one, the first step is being interviewed, because you then can develop your story and develop your flow, and then you can move out and go, let me focus on interviewing some people, in my niche. And, hey, I was interviewed on these shows. I'd love to bring you on the new show that I'm starting. So which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And you can make a case.
I know, it's so hard to choose. Exactly, Mike. You could definitely make the case for either one. I wrote a blog post, should I be a guest expert or a host first? And I do say my typical recommendation is, be a guest first. Get your feet wet. Start building your network by being on other shows. But if you don't create content on your own website, that's not going to lead you anywhere. I had a client for probably 8 months or so, and he was getting interviewed on so many shows. And eventually he said, I'm not seeing results in my business. And to be honest with you, when I went to his website and, when listeners would go to his website, all there was an opt-in form, like join my community. People have no reason to join your community, join your email list if there's no content there for them to consume. So sure, you can be interviewed on tons of shows, get well known, but at the end of the day, you need people actually on your email list, on your website. That's the only way you're going to be able to sell to them and build your business.
Yeah, I'm sure you can call it different things. I like to call it an authority positioning platform or authority positioning portfolio, because like a graphic designer, you can walk in and pull out this sketchbook and go, hey, here's my, portfolio. Look at this and that I've done. Well, as an entrepreneur, whatever you're in, whether you're a solopreneur or whether you, run a brick and mortar shop, the point is if you are talking to someone, showing them what you can do, product or service, in that sales situation, because face it, everybody sells, and you might not be, labeled a salesperson, but in our businesses as an entrepreneur, you're selling something, the concept of working with you or a widget or whatever. But what if someone does? Because you know what? What's your Google resume look like? What do people find when they go online? And your reputation is so important, but when they land on that website, do you have the last Facebook post from, 3 years ago? Because that really screams so much. But yet, if you can show, oh, hey, I was mentioned in the media here, and oh, hey, my latest book came out last month, and here's my radio interview I did with so-and-so, and oh, I was interviewed on here, then people, are they going to consume every word of that or listen to every syllable of that interview? Nope, but whatever amount they do listen to, it just solidifies the fact that you are who you say you are.
Yeah, and not to mention when you create content, by being on other shows, by having your own podcast, writing a blog, like when you're doing all of that content creation of positioning yourself as authority, not only is it, positioning to people, but Google likes that. I keep hearing time and time again, I have people that reach out to me, want to be interviewed as a guest or need podcast guests. And they say, listen, I've Googled, and your company is the one that's coming up. You keep coming up because I create an insane amount of content around podcasting. I'm not just saying, hey, this is what we do and buy from me, but I'm constantly making videos. I'm constantly writing blog posts. And that's, that's one thing that can really set you apart from your competition. I mean, when I look around at all the other people that are doing what I'm doing, not many of them, if any, are doing videos, blogs, podcasts, going on other shows on a consistent basis. So with whatever business you're in, if you create all that content, focus on being a teacher and an authority in your niche, not just the best at what you do. You can't just be the best. You have to be the leader and the person who actually knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think that an interesting aspect too is what you described is people doing some searches online for things that you provide a service for, and that would be kind of like a broad keyword, let's say podcasting or whatever, and that's the upper echelon, the best of the best result. But here's something for people just starting off that people may not realize. I've seen a focus group research study that said when 350 people were asked this question, what did they say? When you hear about a business or a service, what's the next thing you do? Well, 87% said, I Google them. So you might be at the local chamber or Rotary or church or wherever, and you go, hey, here's my card. They don't just take your card and just go to your website. They're going to Google you and your company name. So what shows up then? So now you've got this really refined Google search of your name or your company name. Well, if then you have some of these pieces of content tied to that, now it shows up as, oh, Jessica Rhodes. When they Google that name, here is interview, video. Or Tom Smith, Betty Johnson. When you put your name with your business name next in that Google search, now here come all of these assets that you've developed positioning your authority, and that's how you can get a quick hit right away. Over time, when you continue doing those pieces of content, then someone can Google, a phrase like, getting podcast guests, and then they're going to see you out there, or Google a phrase that your business would do more of a broad thing, and then you're going to start showing up. But you're going to get some pretty good results really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's something. Have you ever heard of, this is something I heard years and years ago, but Stanley Milgram and Ziff, I think his name was, I forget his last name, but Ziff, Z-I-P-F. Social psychologists, they said the marketplace will blindly believe the words of an expert. And then the second piece of that is, with limited time and opportunity to experiment, your ideal clients intentionally narrow their choices to those who are on top. Meaning, people are busy. They're texting an instant message and this and that and the other, and when they need whatever you're offering and they get introduced to you or they Google you. Now all of a sudden they're like, oh, interview, podcast. Okay, good, let's call them. Their decision is made really quickly when they see that you are an expert. And how are you an expert? Because you're being seen out there. So I think that's another aspect of this podcasting. And, let's face it, sometimes people feel like I can't go on camera. I can't do a video on my webcam, but, I can pick up the phone or do a podcast interview by phone. I can do that all day long.
Yeah, I just actually recorded, and everything you're saying is making me think of why the audience size isn't actually important, because just by having a podcast, just by going on shows, you're sending that message out there that you are the authority figure and that you're the go-to expert. So, for example, if you get booked on a podcast, let's say they have 10 listeners. Let's say they have no listeners because they haven't even launched yet. But if you post on Facebook, or if you email your list and say, I'm so excited, I was booked to be the featured expert on whatever your expertise is on whatever podcast. It doesn't matter if people have never heard of the podcast or don't know how many listeners it has, but the fact that you were booked, or the fact that you host a podcast on this topic, you're on iTunes, you're on Stitcher Radio, you're on iHeartRadio, and you can really be on all of these different platforms now, that is authority positioning. It's not about how many people are listening, but it's about creating that content and putting yourself out there as the expert.
What you just said should be, highlighted, bolded, and just like looked at for 10 minutes a day, every single day. So
that's why my latest podcast is coming out tomorrow. It's all why audience size isn't important. I think I'll have to add a little bit more about, what I just said, because it's so key. I mean, people come to me all the time, well, how do I know how big the audience is? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. I mean, you don't know how big the audience is because guess what? It's just not public information, so there's really nothing we can do about it, but it doesn't matter. This is about authority positioning, creating content, and building relationships.
And I'll give you an example too of what I have seen in some of the ways that I give advice, right? You take these things and isn't it interesting when you see some people that go, they've been on 428 shows and they've written 12 books. Well, you got to start somewhere. So even if you've been on that one show, you were interviewed on a show, and maybe you had a media mention in the news, that's all you have. Well, whatever you're selling or the next interaction you have with a prospect, and it doesn't matter who is hearing this going, well, I sell widgets or I sell services it doesn't matter. The next time you are getting ready to meet with in person or on the phone with someone that could buy your product or service, what if you sent them an email ahead of time that said, hey, I'm looking so much to connecting next week and talking further. Before we connect, thought you would like to take just a quick minute and take a couple look at a couple of these links. Link number 1 is where I was interviewed on and link number 2 is where I was, hey, talk to you later. Now, unbelievably different positioning than, hey, I was on somebody's show and I didn't get any calls. That's not the point. You have to then take these things and put them into action. When you then connect with that person the next week, phone or in person, and let's say that they glance at the one link and listen to 5 minutes of the other of the interview, the fact that they did that and that you were positioned that way, you walk in as an advocate and an educator and a resource, not as a salesperson.
Oh, yeah, that's such a great point. And the other thing you could do, especially if people are meeting in person, or even if you're not meeting in person, is taking things offline. So what I've done, because I exhibit at conferences and, have booths and stuff, and I have gotten a couple of the interviews I've done on other podcasts, and I burn them onto a CD. Now, I'm sure we're really getting close to just needing to use flash drive because more and more people are like, I don't play CDs. But, just having something, even if they never put it in their CD player and play it, to have a physical CD with multiple interviews that you've done on other shows, I mean, that's authority positioning. So that's I just did a video about that this week. Actually comes out today. Is all these different things you can do to leverage the power of your interview. So just going on the podcast and just doing an interview isn't enough. You actually have to take that content, get it out there, send links. So on Facebook all the time in the different groups and LinkedIn forums, people are asking questions. If you have if you've done an interview with somebody, or if you've interviewed somebody that answers that question, instead of just commenting on the post with your answer, link to your interview. Somebody did that today. They posted a question, how do I leverage this media attention that I got? And a woman, Donna Cravato, was interviewed about that very topic. And so everyone was linking to Donna's interview as opposed to just writing the advice they got from her.
Yeah. And the more, and think about too, be the big fish in the little pond. So your sphere of influence, which is your followers on social, your email list, your blog, whatever little world that you've created and continue to create, when you get these things, when you either interview someone or are interviewed yourself or have a media mention, whatever these things are, right? And you just, humbly just kind of put it out there, hey, so honored to have been, or hey, I just wanted to make sure you guys saw. You get people that go, is every single person going to reply going, Yahoo, I'm so glad you did this? No, but the little, the cataclysmic shift between here I am again, here's my stuff, buy it, compared to, oh, hey, I was just interviewed on, let me know if I can ever help you. It's so different, and people are going, oh, okay, delete, but, oh, I'm going to watch this a little bit or listen to this a little bit. But now all of a sudden when their need comes, which it will in time, because Chet Holmes, you taught in his book, Ultimate Sales Machine, there's only 3% of your market ready to buy what you got right this minute. The other percent, 90+%, are, ready at some point. They just, aren't ready right this minute. So you got to be there and in front of them. And what better way than to show that you're out there hustling and grinding, as Mark Cuban says.
Yeah. I have people that I've met years ago, and, I love it. Buyers buy when they're ready to buy. And I've got people that I've met at conferences years ago, and then, 2 years later, they connect with you and they say, we met 2 years ago, I've been following you, been listening to your podcast, and now I'm ready. So it is so important to continue creating the content, because businesses don't just get created and explode in 6 months. I mean, it takes a long time to build that momentum. It's not overnight, and people, not everyone's going to be ready to invest in your services right away.
Okay, so let's say that someone goes, okay, I could probably interview some people, but I'm not sure how to set up a podcast and all that. And there is a few steps. It's not as hard as people might think. But they're going to start with, I want to get booked on some podcasts. So you offer the service, but what mistakes do you find that people make when they start at least doing it on their own until they're ready to amp up and bring on a service like yours?
Well, I think the big mistake, and what I hear a lot, is they're not getting on the right shows and they're not targeting the right podcasts. One thing that we help our clients with is we get people connected with the shows that are actually going to help reach their goals. So the first thing that you have to know is, what is your goal? Why are you being interviewed as a podcast expert or as an expert on podcasts? Are you trying to build your email list, or are you just trying to get kind of more exposure? Are you trying to connect with the host? Like, are you trying to actually build? So there's a lot of different reasons why you might want to be an expert or, a guest on podcasts. You have to know what that is. You have to know who your target audience is, who is the type of person that you want to be reaching. You have to take all that information before you start going on shows. I was just emailing with someone last week, and, he had expressed interest in being a guest expert on podcasts. I was checking in with him, and he goes, well, I've been interviewed on some shows. They're really just people that came to me, like hosts asked him to be on the show. He goes, I didn't really see much from them. And my feedback to that is, it's probably because you didn't choose those shows as the ones that are best for you. They wanted to interview, which is great, but you actually have to select the podcasts that are going to be the best fit. So, again, knowing what your goal is with the podcast. Why are you going on shows? Because if it's just, and, we can get into a whole conversation about what a goal is, the SMART goals, and we won't dive into that now, but, go to any of John Lee Dubas's Freedom Journal interviews, and he'll tell you all about how to set a goal, know what your goal is, and then know who your target audience is. And it just can't be women ages 20 to 50. Like, you have to be specific about, does this person have a job? Do they have a business? How, what kind of revenue are they generating? Know all of that. And then you have to find the podcasts that are actually targeting that type of person, or maybe the host is that type of person. Because a lot of times going on podcasts and being a host, it's about the person that you're interviewing or the person that's interviewing you, and it might not actually have as much to do with the people that are listening.
Yeah, that's pretty huge. And so here's what I would say too. One of the cliche things that people will say, but cliche in a good way, not like a negative light, but is go on a podcast to serve first, not to get. Yes. And it's that mentality, it's that attitude, it's that Bob Berg go-giver mentality.
I love Bob Berg.
Yeah, I mean, it really is something to keep in mind. But what I would say and what I've found myself is there's that inner struggle between okay, I can give all day long, but I got to pay the bills too. So what are some tips on balancing serving and giving in your information and educating, but at the same time, you need a little ROI because you need to have the end game of, I need to sell my widget, my service, my book, my something. So how do you accomplish both without being out of balance?
Well, it's a really good question, and it's a valid question because we are doing podcast interviews and getting interviewed and creating content to grow our business. And I think the key is knowing that being interviewed on podcasts, having your own show, it's a strategy of content marketing and inbound marketing, and that the sale and when people actually buy, it's not going to happen at this stage of the marketing process. So you really just have to focus on creating giving as much valuable content to that audience as possible, and having it be relevant and urgent enough for the listeners and the people consuming the content so that they will want to seek out more from you. Because some people say, well, I don't want to give it all away because then they won't want to buy my course, or I don't want to give it all away because then they won't want to buy my service. I will tell people literally step by step how you book a podcast interview. I'll tell you how to find podcasts. I will tell you how to write the emails. I'll tell you everything because I know at the end of the day they're going to say, oh, I don't actually want to do all of that. So
I heard somebody, I forget, I read so much and I listen to so much I forget who this gets attributed to, but someone said, and it's probably one of these general business, what's everyone's favorite radio station, WIIFM, what's in it for me? It's kind of like someone that everyone talks about, right? Well, anyway, I heard recently where it was said, give away your best information, and then people will pay you to help them implement what you just told them.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, that's 110% it, is that you've got to give away your best information, because if you do give a ton of value, your information's great, your interview's great, people will want to come work with you. They will want to know, how do I work with this person? They will be so, you got to be charismatic so people actually want to work with you, because sometimes you might not be the best at what you do, or you might not have the best widget, but if you are a person that people want to be associated with, they'll want to work with you. So, provide as much value. But then, really to answer your question, it's having some type of, one tip I give a lot that might not apply to everyone, but a lot of my clients will have some type of free offer, or, just a free call to action. Like, I have a free white paper or a free special report. You can just go to this, landing page and download it, and not even having it behind an opt-in wall. I mean, you can, but just having it there for someone to download, because that gets them to your website. And if they like that, then they're more likely to start reading your blog and then maybe opt in for whatever your lead magnet happens to be on your website. I don't do that really, because I do podcast interviews to build relationships with other podcasters and basically to build exposure. But some people really want to specifically build their list, or they really want to get their white paper or their special report or ebook. And so that's a good thing to do, is to have that specific call to action.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, so of course, we could probably talk for about another 38 minutes, and I covered, I think, two of the questions that I thought we would cover, because we have just gone so deep on some of these, which is incredible. Yeah. But for anyone looking to take it to the next level of, okay, I understand the concept, but I just don't have the connections, don't have the time to find the right shows, your service offers that. So what is the best way for people to learn more about how Interview Connections can help them get booked on more good, solid, targeted podcasts?
Yeah, so interviewconnections.com is our website, and that's where you can learn all about our services and how we can get you booked. If you are, not quite ready to invest in our services, my main home base on the web, it's Jessica Rhodes, RHODES.biz, jessicarhodes.biz. I have a weekly podcast, weekly videos, and weekly blog all about podcast interviews. So if you're just, wanting to dive into the content and start absorbing all the information, join me there. And then there are links to my other sites on jessicarhodes.biz.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jessica. It was wonderful talking to you, getting to know you, and confirming some of the things that we both already know, but I could feel a spark on both your side and my side, like, oh, yeah.
It was fun.
I just talked about that, and it's just really neat to have like-minded people where we just have a great mastermind talk, and hopefully some listeners will hear some of these and go, I can do that in my business. I can, implement this, because none of these were earth-shattering things, but it's just really good nuggets. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.